When I first met Jason, I thought I had found everything I ever wanted in a partner. He was charming in a way that felt effortless. He held doors open for me, pulled up my chair at restaurants, and never let me walk to my car alone at night. His smile had this warmth that made me believe I was safe with him, like he was the kind of man who would protect me at all costs. We had only been dating for a few weeks, but it felt like we had known each other forever. Jason had a good job. He dressed well. He made me laugh, and he listened when I spoke. On weekends, he would pick me up in his car, turn up the music, and take me on long drives with no real destination, just the two of us, talking for hours, laughing, sharing stories, planning little trips we might take in the future. To everyone around me, my friends, my family, he looked like the perfect boyfriend. Even I believed it. He bought me flowers for no reason, sent me good morning texts before I even woke up, and told me every single day how lucky he was to have me. I remember thinking, this is it. This is the man I could see myself with long term. I ignored the tiny things that didn't sit right, like the way his voice would change when someone cut him off in traffic, the way his jaw tightened, the way his hands gripped the steering wheel a little too hard, or how his eyes turned cold when he talked about people who had disrespected him in the past. But I brushed it off. I told myself, everyone gets angry sometimes. No one is perfect. After all, he treated me like a queen. He always reminded me, I'd do anything to protect you. No one will ever hurt you as long as I'm around. And I believed him. At that time, I had no idea that the same man who promised to protect me could also become the one I would fear the most. Chapter 1 ends here with me sitting in his passenger seat, watching the sun dip below the horizon, holding his hand, and thinking I was the luckiest girl in the world. I didn't know the storm was just around the corner. It was a Saturday afternoon. Jason had just picked me up, like he always did, smiling, reaching across to kiss me before we even pulled out of my driveway. The weather was perfect, clear skies, a soft breeze. He suggested we go for a long drive, maybe stop by a diner we both liked on the edge of town. I remember thinking how peaceful the day felt, until it wasn't. We were cruising down a busy road when it happened. A car, an older model, clearly struggling to keep up with traffic, swerved a little too close and accidentally cut us off. Jason slammed his hand against the steering wheel, his face tightening instantly. "Are you kidding me?" he shouted, his voice sharp enough to make me flinch. Through the window, I saw the driver. He was an old man, maybe in his 70s, frail-looking, his hands shaking slightly as he lifted them in an apologetic gesture. His lips moved as if saying, "I'm sorry." But Jason wasn't having it. His breathing changed, short, angry bursts. I placed my hand on his arm gently. "Jason, it's okay." He didn't mean it. Let it go. But he didn't even look at me. His jaw was locked, his knuckles white around the steering wheel. Then, without warning, he pressed down hard on the gas pedal. My stomach dropped. "Jason, what are you doing?" I shouted. He didn't answer. He was chasing him. For 15 minutes, I sat frozen as Jason trailed the old man's car, weaving through traffic recklessly, his eyes dark with rage. Every time the man tried to switch lanes, Jason followed. Every time he tried to speed up, Jason pushed harder. The old man's car finally pulled over to the side of the road, hazard lights blinking. Relief should have washed over me, but instead, fear clawed at my chest. Jason slammed the brakes, jumped out of the car, and stormed toward him. I scrambled behind, yelling, "Jason, stop, please." But my voice was drowned by his fury. He leaned into the old man's window, screaming words I never thought I'd hear come out of his mouth. Vulgar, hateful words. The old man sat there, wide-eyed, his hands trembling on the steering wheel. And then Jason did something that made my blood run cold. He kicked the side view mirror. Hard. Once. Twice. Until it cracked and dangled, helplessly. The old man flinched with every blow. I stood there, frozen, my heart pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. Finally, Jason turned, walked back to our car, and got in like nothing had happened. Like he hadn't just terrorized a man who could have been someone's grandfather. I sat in silence the entire ride home, staring out the window, too afraid to even look at him. Jason tapped his fingers on the steering wheel, humming along to the radio, as if we had just stopped for gas or coffee. In that moment, I realized something terrifying. The man sitting next to me wasn't who I thought he was. That night, when I got home, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed replaying the scene, over and over again, the old man's terrified eyes, Jason's clenched fists, the sound of glass cracking under his kicks. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Jason's face. Not the face that smiled at me on our first date. Not the face that kissed me goodnight, but the face twisted with rage. Veins bulging, eyes cold, unrecognizable. And yet, when he texted me later, "Had a great time today, babe. Sweet dreams. Love you." He sounded like the Jason I thought I knew. It was like he was two different people. I wanted to tell someone. My best friend, maybe. Or my sister. But what would I even say? Hey, the guy I've been bragging about for 3 months just terrorized a 70-year-old man in broad daylight. I could already imagine the look on their faces, the judgment, the concern, the "I told you so." So I kept it to myself. When I saw Jason the next day, he acted completely normal. He brought me coffee, kissed my forehead, and joked around like nothing had happened. Part of me wanted to scream at him, demand an explanation, ask him what kind of man does that to a helpless stranger. But I stayed quiet, and in that silence, something inside me shifted. I started noticing little things I had ignored before. The way his tone sharpened whenever a waiter got an order wrong. How quickly he flipped from charming to hostile when someone disagreed with him. The stories he told about people from his past, always painting himself as the victim, always blaming others. And every time he got that look in his eye, the same one he had when he chased the old man, my stomach tightened. I began to wonder, what if one day that anger turned on me? But instead of leaving, I told myself what so many women in my position tell themselves. Maybe it was just a bad day. Maybe I'm overthinking. He loves me. He'd never hurt me. At least, that's what I wanted to believe. But deep down, the fear had already taken root. In the weeks that followed, Jason's behavior became harder to ignore. At first, it was subtle. Little comments that sounded sweet on the surface, but carried an edge underneath. Like when I wore a dress to meet my friends, he smiled and said, "You look beautiful, babe. But do you really want other guys staring at you all night?" Or when I didn't text him back fast enough, my phone would buzz with messages. "Hello? Where are you? Why aren't you answering me?" And if I told him I was busy, he'd laugh it off but say, "Too busy for me? That doesn't sound right." At first, I brushed it away. I told myself, he just cares. He just loves me. But love wasn't supposed to feel like walking on eggshells. Then came the outbursts. Small things would set him off traffic. A rude cashier, a neighbor's barking dog. He'd go from calm to explosive in seconds. His hands would grip the steering wheel so hard his knuckles turned white. His jaw would tighten, his voice sharp and venomous. I started dreading car rides with him. Every time he drove, I'd sit stiffly in the passenger seat, silently praying nothing would happen to provoke him. One night, while we were at dinner, our waiter forgot to bring the sauce Jason had asked for. Jason leaned forward, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "Wow. One simple job and you can't even get that right." The waiter stammered an apology, but Jason's glare made him shrink. I wanted to crawl under the table. When I whispered, "Jason, please, it's not a big deal," he turned to me with a smile so fake it sent chills down my spine. "Relax, babe. I'm just joking." But I knew it wasn't a joke. Behind that smile was the same rage I had seen the day he chased the old man. And sometimes when his temper flared, he'd look at me in a way that made my chest tighten. A flicker in his eyes, as if for just a second, I was the one standing in the old man's place. That's when the fear I had been hiding began to grow louder, because now I wasn't just afraid of what he could do to strangers. I was afraid of what he could do to me. It happened on a Thursday night. I had just gotten home from work, exhausted, ready to curl up in bed with a book. Jason texted me, "Be ready, I'm outside." I hadn't planned on going anywhere, but when I stepped outside, there he was, leaning against his car, smiling that same smile that once made me feel safe. We drove to his apartment. At first, it was normal takeout food, a movie playing in the background. But then my phone buzzed. It was my best friend Mia, sending a funny video. I laughed quietly to myself. Jason's eyes snapped toward me. "Who's that?" "It's just Mia," I said lightly, showing him my screen. But instead of relaxing, his expression hardened. "You think it's funny to text other people when you're with me?" I blinked. "Jason, it's just a joke. She's my best friend." He leaned closer, his voice low, dangerous. "You know what I don't like? Disrespect. And laughing at your phone while I'm sitting right here feels like disrespect." I froze. My heart raced as I tried to keep my voice calm. "Jason, you're overreacting. It's nothing." And then, in a flash, his hand slammed down on the coffee table so hard the glasses rattled. "Don't tell me I'm overreacting," he shouted. I jumped, my body trembling. For the first time, I saw a version of him I had prayed I'd never see directed at me. The room went silent, except for my own shaky breathing. A few seconds later, Jason leaned back, his face softening, a smile crawling back onto his lips like a mask. "Babe, relax. I didn't mean to scare you. You know I love you, right? I don't like being disrespected." He pulled me into his arms, but I felt nothing but cold. That night, lying beside him, I couldn't close my eyes. The truth hit me like a punch to the chest. If I stayed, it was only a matter of time before his anger would break past words, past slam tables, and land on me. I thought back to the old man, terrified, shaking, trapped. And for the first time, I realized I wasn't just afraid of Jason anymore. I was in danger. That was the breaking point. That was the night I decided I needed a plan. Not just to leave, but to make sure he could never hurt me or anyone else again. After that night at Jason's apartment, something inside me snapped. I couldn't just hope things would get better. I knew they wouldn't. Jason wasn't going to change. He didn't see what he did as wrong. And if I stayed quiet, one day I'd become his next victim. So I made a decision. I wouldn't just leave him. I would destroy him. But to do that, I needed proof. The first step was simple. I started recording. Every time Jason lost his temper in the car, every time his voice rose sharp and venomous, I'd quietly tap the record button on my phone. His words filled the files, insults, threats, his anger spilling out like poison. Then, I began saving his texts. The ones where he accused me of cheating just because I didn't reply fast enough. The ones where he threatened to teach people a lesson if they disrespected him. Piece by piece, I was building a case. Still, I knew it wasn't enough. One night, I drove to a quiet street on the other side of town and parked my car. My hands shook as I dialed a number I had saved weeks ago but never thought I'd actually use. It was the old man, the one Jason had terrorized on the road. I had managed to track him down through a mutual connection. My uncle's friend knew him. His name was Mr. Harris. When he picked up, his voice was cautious, trembling slightly. "Hello?" I introduced myself, explaining who I was. There was a long pause on the line before he sighed deeply. "I remember that boy. I'll never forget his face. I thought he was going to kill me that day." My chest tightened. "Mr. Harris, I think I'm next, and I need your help." Silence again. Then his voice, firmer this time. "Tell me what you need." And just like that, I wasn't alone anymore. We met in secret at a small diner during the day when Jason was at work. I told Mr. Harris everything about Jason's temper, his control, his threats. He listened carefully, his eyes full of both pity and determination. Together, we started forming a plan, a trap, one Jason would never see coming. The kind of plan that would take him down once and for all. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of hope. Jason thought he had all the power, but soon he would learn what it felt like to be the one caught off guard. And I would be the one standing over him when it all came crashing down. We didn't rush into it. Every step was measured, every move premeditated. Jason had taught me one thing well. He fed on surprises and unpredictability. So I made this the opposite: predictable, documented, undeniable. First, I made sure I had everything I needed. The recordings on my phone were organized into folders. Texts that showed his threats and jealousy were screenshotted and time-stamped. Mr. Harris agreed to write a sworn statement about what had happened on the road. Mia, my best friend, offered to be at the scene as a witness and to stand ready to testify. I even went to a legal aid clinic and spoke to a counselor about protective steps. They told me exactly how evidence should be preserved for police and an employer. Knowing the law empowered me in a way fear never could. Then we baited the trap. I told Jason I wanted to really talk about us. I said I needed closure. He came, predictably smelling like cologne, brimming with that false charm that had once disarmed me. He drove us to a busy plaza near downtown, a place with shops, security cameras, and foot traffic. I insisted we sit at an outdoor table, where people could see us, where voices would carry. What I didn't tell him was that Mr. Harris was sitting at a cafe across the square, that Mia was watching from a parked car with her phone on record, and that a file with all my evidence had been emailed to Jason's boss and to the local police station minutes earlier. I started simple. I asked him to explain how he thought he had the right to chase a 70-year-old man in traffic. I played calm to calm and let my voice be steady. He smirked at first, then brushed it off like he always did. "Why are you pushing this now?" he said. "Why drag up old crap?" "Because it's not old for me," I said. "You did that, Jason. And you keep doing it, just different people. I can't be the next person you gaslight into silence." His jaw tightened. He laughed, low and dangerous. "You're blowing this out of proportion." I slid my phone across the table and hit play on the clip, where he screamed at the old man. Watched it show the crack in the mirror, the man's hands shaking. People nearby glanced over. A couple walking by stopped to stare. Something in him snapped. He rose from his chair like a spring uncoiling. "Turn that off," he barked. His face went dark, the same look that had chased the old man. "Jason," I said, standing slowly so I wouldn't spook him. "If you raise your voice, if you touch me, someone will call the police. I have copies of everything. Mr. Harris is right over there, he saw it. Mia has it on record. I've emailed this to your boss. This isn't a bluff." He laughed in an angry, incredulous sound, but the laughter broke. He reached for my phone. Mia's car horn blared on cue. A security guard from the jewelry store across the square walked over, and a man who'd been watching an older gentleman with a steady gaze took out his phone and started recording. The plaza had become a court of witnesses without me asking for permission. Jason grabbed my arm. The movement was quick, reflexive, violent. In the second it took him to make that move, every camera focused. Someone shouted, "Hey, don't touch her!" A small crowd formed. Jason's hand tightened, then released, as if he realized the moment had shifted. The power he thought he had was gone because it wasn't private anymore. Sirens wailed in the distance as a neighbor who'd seen the commotion called it in. The police arrived within minutes. Mr. Harris stepped forward and spoke calmly to the officers, recounting the traffic incident. Mia played the recording she'd captured on her phone. The security guard handed over the footage from the plaza's camera. I felt the brittle edge of fear fold into a strange, heavy relief. Officers took statements. Jason raged and cursed and tried to control the narrative. But the recordings, the witnesses, the emails, everything lined up like dominoes. He couldn't charm his way out of hard evidence. When the officer explained that pushing, threats, and property damage were all reportable offenses, his voice faltered. For the first time since I'd known him, he looked truly exposed. Later that night, while Jason sat in an interview room at the police station, his phone buzzed endlessly. It was his manager. "We need to talk." "Is this true?" Within hours, HR had suspended him pending investigation after the dossier I'd sent complete, with time-stamped audio and witness statements reached them. I didn't celebrate, not really. Revenge, I'd learned, wasn't fireworks and vindication. It was a slow, cold work of reclaiming safety. But as I walked away from the station with Mia and Mr. Harris by my side, my shoulders no longer felt like they were carrying the same weight. The trap had worked not because I wanted him ruined, but because I wanted him stopped. As the night swallowed the plaza lights, I understood that what I had set in motion couldn't be undone. The rest, court dates, hearings, a lengthier investigation was ugly and complicated and far from cinematic. But he was no longer a private danger. He was an accountable man, and that was where I wanted him to be. The weeks after the plaza were a blur of phone calls, emails, and waiting rooms. I learned quickly that exposing someone doesn't mean the world instantly fixes itself. It means paperwork, interviews, and the slow, grinding machinery of due process. It means sitting in a waiting area while an investigator flips through your recorded files and asks the same questions again and again, watching the same footage until every word has been picked apart. Jason's life started to crack apart in ways that made my chest ache. Even as relief spread through me, his boss called him in for a meeting, HR froze his accounts, and his friends began asking uncomfortable questions. A formal complaint was filed for property damage and harassment. Mr. Harris gave his sworn statement. Mia sat with me through every meeting, holding my hand until my knuckles went white. The first court date felt like the end of something and the beginning of everything else. Walking into the courthouse, I watched Jason from across the room. He looked smaller than I remembered, eyes darting, jaw clenched, no charm to hide behind. The prosecutor's office took the recordings, the witness statements, and the security footage and built a case that couldn't be argued away by excuses. In the courtroom, things were neither quick nor cinematic. The judge asked measured questions. Jason's lawyer tried to minimize. He called the chase a momentary lapse. He called the mirror damage an accident. But I had months of documentation. I had the old man's frightened voice. I had the recording of Jason screaming and kicking. I spoke to my voice steady, even when my hands shook. I described not just the incident, but the pattern of control, the fear that had threaded through my days. I described the night he slammed the table when I laughed at a video. I described the way I started to map exits from rooms and how I timed calls to my friends so someone would know where I was. When the judge read the ruling, the sentence was practical rather than punitive. Jason was ordered to pay restitution for the damage, attend anger management, and was placed on probation with a mandatory counseling program. HR terminated him from his position pending final investigation. The criminal charge for harassment carried a small misdemeanor because the prosecution prioritized the record and a restraining order instead of heavy jail time, something that left me both relieved and quietly conflicted. I had wanted him stopped. I hadn't wanted him erased. Outside the courthouse, Mr. Harris hugged me like a grandson he never had. Mia laughed through tears. For the first time in months, I felt light enough to breathe properly. But the relief came with an odd aftertaste. Revenge, what I'd once imagined as a fiery, satisfying moment, was a slow, legal, bureaucratic result that didn't fit neatly into the story I had imagined. The aftermath required its own kind of courage. Friends and family rallied, but some relationships altered in ways I hadn't expected. People I thought would be my unwavering support drifted, unsure how to handle the darker details. Others stepped forward in ways that changed how I saw safety and community. I started therapy, partly to process the fear and partly to relearn how to trust my own judgment. The therapist helped me understand that revenge was never only about punishment, it was about reclaiming agency. At home, small rituals stitched me back together. Morning coffee without checking for threats. Walks that weren't timed to escape an unknown temper. Nights where my phone stayed on the bedside table and not under my pillow. I started saying no aloud in situations that used to make me apologize for existing. It felt strange and powerful. Months later, Jason reached out through a mutual acquaintance, apologizing in words that felt paper thin. He said he'd learned and that he regretted his actions. I read the message twice, then forwarded it to my therapist. Closure, I learned, wasn't a single definitive moment. It was a collection of smaller, quieter decisions, choosing to prioritize my safety, choosing to keep walking into sunlight. There were nights I still flinched at the sound of tires on wet pavement. The old man's eyes lingered in my memory, but the fear receded, replaced by a sharper awareness. One that taught me to spot the small red flags before they became catastrophes. I learned the difference between romantic intensity and control. I learned that charm can be a mask and that anger is only one of the tools abusers use to dominate. Most importantly, I learned to believe myself again. Revenge, in the way I delivered it, never looked like the movies. It was quieter, grayer, full of legal forms and counselor recommendations. It involved witnesses, statements, and the slow, public dismantling of a private menace. But it worked. Jason could no longer hide behind charm. He was accountable, and that accountability made the streets safer for Mr. Harris, and the space around me less threatening. On a warm afternoon months after the court ruled, I visited a small park bench. Mr. Harris was there, feeding pigeons like an old man who had regained a little of his ease. We sat and talked about ordinary things: speeches in summer, the news, silly neighborhood gossip. I watched the sun catch his silver hair and felt a softness in my chest I hadn't felt in a long time. It wasn't triumph that I felt. It was quiet justice and a long, cautious healing. I walked away from the bench with my steps lighter, not because the past no longer existed, but because I had reclaimed my narrative. I had turned fear into action, silence into testimony. I hadn't sought to ruin a life for the sake of pain. I had sought to stop harm and to protect myself and others. As the city moved on, so did I. The drives became something I chose. The doors I walked through were no longer doors I felt trapped behind. I started making plans again, small at first, then bolder. A weekend trip with Mia, a class I'd wanted to take, a move to a new apartment with windows that felt safe. One evening, as I packed a small bag for a trip, I found a note tucked into an old jacket pocket. Jason's handwriting, from happier times. A small, faded "I love you." I smiled, a strange, soft smile. And then I folded the note and placed it in a small box. Not thrown away, not hoarded, contained. There are decisions that define us not because they are grand, but because they are honest. Exposing Jason was one of those decisions. It didn't make the pain vanish, but it made me more myself. If there is a lesson in all of this, it isn't the thrill of revenge. It's the power of refusing to be silenced. It's the strength of choosing evidence over shame, community over isolation, and safety over the illusion of love. That day, I closed the box and walked out the door into a life that I had helped to reclaim, step by step, choice by brave choice.